The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
I I just went ahead and started the recording, even though we may not be ready to do it. I'm going to chop this up into smaller segments.
Oh, you know what? I'll do the same thing. Let me start my recording too, just for fun.
Yeah.
That way we can have two tests. We were talking about file. And give me one sec here. Open project, open recent. Camtasia.
Okay, good.
Start recording. Anyway, I've got a recording going also. That way we can edit. If we want, we can edit this one. And I'm not sure what the difference might be, but maybe between the two of us, we can find one where the sound doesn't get separated when we upload it.
Right. Well, I think, excuse me, I think when you record it with Camtasia, it's going to capture your cameras as well. Right now, mine is when I do this GoToMeeting recording, it's only going
Right.
to capture your screen. It's not going to
That's
record our
good.
faces.
Oh, it won't record our faces?
No. And what I was laughing about when you got on here was I set up my high dollar Wirecast software, and as soon as you said hello, it went into a loop and it was going hello, 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 hello. And I couldn't kill it. Couldn't figure out what was
Yeah.
going on. So I'm going to have to work on that a little bit.
I recorded the team meeting last night with
good.
which was more than anything just kind of a hangout. And it was and I haven't watched it. It created a huge file, but you know, it takes a couple hours to compress it or whatever, and I haven't done that yet, and I haven't watched it. And so based on what you're saying, you don't think it'll record our faces. That's interesting. I wonder why not.
It's just a limitation of the GoToWebinar software.
Well, I'm not using GoToWebinar. I'm using Camtasia.
Okay, well, Camtasia will record the faces. Camtasia will record whatever's on your screen.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, and I've got a recording set up in GoToWebinar right now. So it's only going to record the screens. It's not going to record faces.
Right. And I think that might be the problem with a lot of those videos, that the audio gets separated from the video, because I think that GoToWebinar recording feature is just junk.
Well,
I honestly do think that's what it is, because we want the whole experience. We want the faces, and we want this whoever's screen sharing and all that. So we'll figure that out.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to do with this with Wirecast, but I got to figure out the sound thing, because as soon as you start looping, I'm like, oh crap, I've got a problem.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense that you would have, you know, different attempts at it or whatever. But I love the shirt. I love the smile. I was up until 4 o'clock, and I wow, I'm glad you woke me up. I figured I could get down here in about 10 minutes, but it took me about 15 or 18, it looks like. And
it
so,
doesn't matter.
well, I know you got to go to work, and we want to have a friendly discussion or whatever. And so, yeah, I haven't looked at the forum posts.
Okay. Well,
let me click on both of these.
So since we're recording, let me set the scene for the people that are going to be watching this in the future. Our idea, yours and mine, is that we'll get together once or twice a week, whenever we can, and we'll just pull out a few questions from the forum and give you a chance to answer them, and then maybe talk about other topics that may be of interest to the audience, and then we're going to cut them up into bite-sized chunks, basically.
That's a great idea.
So I sent you an email a little while ago while you were still snoozing, and with 3 different topics. 2 of them are forum posts, and then the third one's kind of general. So let me go to the first one. If you get that email open, you can pull it up on your screen.
Yeah, I only saw two links in the email. Oh, yep. Third topic, Scringo. I'll ask you a series of questions about it. Okay, cool.
Okay, so the first topic.
Yeah.
We've got a forum post here from Cyrus8888. Android initial loading page. greeting, I have 5 tab menus used on my Android app: homepage, custom URL screen, menu button screen, menu list screen, and the other 2 are also custom URL screens. My idea is to load the home screen, which is the custom URL screen, as my initial loading page. But BuzzTouch always loads the menu list screen as the first attempt. So if I remove the menu list screen from my tab menu, it then loads the menu button screen. How can I set this right? So basically, the way I interpret this question is that he's got multiple tabs, and instead of loading the first one, he wants to load the last one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so not only does he want to load the last one, but another way to say that is he wants to load the last one. He wants to set what I would call the selected tab when the app launches. And so that actually is a great question. It's not one that I've heard in a long, long time. I heard it a long time ago, but I haven't heard it since. And so a couple of things to understand about Android tabs before we talk about a strategy, because I think it's important to put a little bit of a backstory on this. The first thing I will say about Android tabs in the current Android download that we're delivering, when you create a tabbed app and download the iOS version, which is very common, the tab bar is along the bottom, just like all the other iOS apps in the world. When you download the Android version of this same project, the tab bar is also along the bottom, and it shouldn't be. I say that because the common paradigm design pattern today is the Android tabs are across the top and iOS tabs are across the bottom. The reason that project is designed that way, and the reason that that tab bar is set up that way, is because in the early days of Android, tabs basically weren't supported at all. And so we did the best we could in making really what was a decision on our part to try to make both projects kind of similar. And so when you downloaded your iOS project and you downloaded your Android project, the tab bars would be along the bottom. So with that being said, the latest Android project that we're working on that's almost ready to come out has a more consistent tab bar across the top like so many other Android tabs, and so we're very excited about that. So with that out of the way, I wanted to bring that up because it is a little bit important. So the reason that it's important as it relates to this question, what is the selected tab, is because Android in the early versions of Android didn't have a very well-refined approach to tab bars. They also didn't have a very simple way to say, so here's, select tab number 3. And so again, in the iOS Android comparison, because iOS began with tab bars, it makes sense that it would be kind of easy to select them with code or set the initial tab. But in Android, that wasn't the case. And so your project doesn't already have, the project that you have doesn't already have a quick method to do that. But let's jump into the code real quick and show you how to do it so that you can solve the problem with the idea that we really should be moving your Android tabbed app to a more modern approach with it at the top and different things. And so we'll leave that kind of subject where it is without getting too detailed. But I'm going to go in the I'm going to share my screen. I'm not sharing yet, I don't think. So let me share my screen, and we will explore a real basic file. Well, a basic concept in a more sophisticated file. I've got a debug app here with a bunch of Android files in it. And the file that we're talking about for your dilemma that you're in right now is called BT Activity Root Tabs. So BuzzTouch Activity Root Tabs becomes, in essence, the controller for your tab bar layout that you're talking about. So I'm going to open this file. I'm going to scroll through it pretty quickly because we don't have time to go through the whole entire what do you call it? The whole entire source code file. We could do a whole discussion on that. But I wanted to show you this method called build interface using app data. And that's the method that runs, or I should say this is the method that runs after your application reads or parses the configuration file, and it discovers that, hey, your app has 5 tabs or 3 tabs or 2 tabs, but in this case, remind me, Warren, was it 5 that we had or 4?
I don't know the number was stated, but let's see. It says
Okay.
there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. No, 5. You're correct. 5.
5 tabs. Okay. 5's pretty common. And so the application's read the configuration data. It's discovered that 5 tabs were used, and it does that parsing or that reading first, and then it runs this build interface using app data. And you'll see it checks to see if there are any tabs on line 243. Then on line 253, it discovers, hey, there are tabs. Let's do a for loop. And for each tab in the list, we're going to create the text label and the icon to add to the tab. And you can see here that it creates this tab and it creates the icon. And then it creates, it remembers the data for each of those tabs. And then it creates what's called a tab spec, which is part of a tab host. And I won't get too technical about that, but what a tab spec is and a tab host is that was Android and Google, I guess, is first kind of go at supporting tabs. They have this tab spec concept. It's since been deprecated in Android 4.0 and above. This just isn't how you do it. But in your existing project, it's called a tab spec. And so what you do here is you'll notice that in this loop, you have the for loop, and then in order, it sets up the tabs and adds them to the screen. And then it sets the current tab right here on line 313. So you could change this set current tab to say 4 or set current tab to say 2. And the effect that you're going to get is exactly what you're talking about. You're going to find the tab in your list that you want it to begin at. And you can set that, and you will need to make that modification in your project. You won't be able to make that modification in the control panel. But based on this question, it does make sense to me now that in the layout area in the control panel, we should probably put a little drop-down box or a checkbox next to each tab so that you can say this is the default tab or something like that. So these are some of the reasons why we like doing these questions, is because we're constantly learning or whatever. So for this person, I can't remember his name. I'm a little embarrassed. I should.
It's Cyrus8888.
So Cyrus8888, hopefully that helps you. You're going to be working with the BT activity root tabs file in your project, and you're going to adjust line 313, which I think should make some sense. And what we will do is look for a way to add that to the control panel so you can add the selected tab. Great question. Did that make sense to you, Warren?
Yeah, absolutely did. Absolutely.
We could, like I said, we could talk for a little while, but really what Android has gone to now, and I've been spending weeks on this actually, is this idea of fragments. And the difference between an Android activity, which kind of makes up every screen in an Android project now, or an Android app. An Android activity is very similar to an Android fragment in that they both go on the screen and they both hold little widgets like text views and buttons and images and things like that. They both have what's called the activity life cycle or the fragment life cycle. This is the very mysterious idea of when the fragment is created and destroyed and maintained in memory and all of that. The reason I'm bringing this up is the new tab bar, which is actually called an action bar in Android now, and it has tabs in the action bar. The new action bar, which supports tabs very well, is intended to be used with fragments and not activities. And the reason I'm bringing this up right now is there's been a little bit of a delay in our plugin market with getting a lot of plugins released because we're in the process of converting all the existing plugins in the Android side from activities to fragments. Today, a plugin is an activity, and in the future, it will be a fragment. And the reason for that is, and the reason we're going through all this pain now, is because there's about 75 of them, is because once again, as things changed and as things matured and as the Android operating system and ecosystem has kind of grown up and really done so well, you know, improvements are made and things are discovered, and basically the paradigm now and the thinking now is I should be designing with fragments and not with the activities. And so we're going along with that trend and having to kind of do a little bit of dirty work right now that we don't enjoy. We just want to make new stuff. We don't want to have to worry about the old stuff, but we definitely have to bring it all up to speed, which is just the way it goes.
I fully understand. It's great. It's great that things are moving forward, and hopefully that'll bring the Android plugin market back into focus, because
right,
if you go look at the plugin market right now, almost all of them have an iOS version, but not all of them are Android. And it makes it, if you want to develop for iOS and Android, it makes it tough to make a choice on whether or not to use a plugin, because you basically only want to develop it one time and have your products out.
Yeah, totally. We and once again, you know, as an organization, you know, as a site or a system or a tool or a platform, you know, BuzzTouch is always doing what we think is best for the audience. And one of those things early on was, you know, hey, we had this iOS thing going, and let's support Android. Android didn't exist when we first started, and it made sense that we would try to support both platforms in the exact same kind of way. And in a lot of ways we've done well with that. In a lot of ways we just haven't. And the same thing was true with the developing world out there. You know, they wanted to make an app that worked both the same, and you hear this all of the time. I want an app that'll work the same on both devices. And really what they mean is they don't necessarily want it to look the same. They want it to work the same and function the same, but it is a very, very common mistake that I've made myself, and that we as BuzzTouch has made ourselves, and plugin developers have made themselves on our direction. It's a very, very common mistake to try to take your design elements in your app and literally make them look the same in both devices. And the reason that is because people who use Android devices have a different set of expectations than people who use an iOS device. But the app owners and the app developers oftentimes try to trump that idea and say, I don't care if they have a different perspective. I want my app to look the same on both sides. Or maybe a client will force you into that frame of mind. And more, it's just becoming obvious that you can have two code bases that are the same, two sets of content, you know, that are the same for the same apps, but the design, you shouldn't be too worried about that. And we talked about that with the tabs. You know, the style and the way a tab bar works and an action bar works and an overflow menu and all these things in the Android is just different. And so we just need to learn how to embrace that. And with the plugins, it's the same thing. You know, there's not as much in our community as of yet. It doesn't seem like there's as much enthusiasm for Android, and it's hard to tell why. I think it's probably because we did this for quite a while without Android, and then we added it later. So a significant part of our audience, who are very enthusiastic and want to make things, are still iOS centric. And so slowly, I agree though that we should really work to try to help people support both sides.
Well, to back up to a statement you made just a minute ago, expound a little bit, because I need to understand what you mean by this. You say that from a user's perspective, an Android user's expectations are different than an iOS user. What do you mean by that?
Just certain behaviors in your device, certain patterns in the way that we use our devices are fundamentally different. I'll give you some small examples, but it does matter. Let's say that you have a link in your app to some simple web content. It's a web page. And whether you disguise it without an address bar or whether you make it look like a web page or not is not the discussion, but technically it comes from the web. It's web content. And so on both sides, in the Android world and the Apple world, you're using the built-in widget to show web content, and the widget in iOS is going to be called a UI web view, and the widget in Android is going to be just a web view. And so you load these web views with content, and then you start them or launch them or display them or whatever. In Android, when you load web content, you are oftentimes asked by the device, what type of app do you want to use to look at this web content? Do you like Chrome? Do you like the built-in browser? Do you like, there's many, many browsers in Android. And many, many people install lots of different browsers. The same type of thing with a PDF reader. What do you want to launch this PDF in? So even though it's in your app, it's very common to have these questions pop up inside of an application. Which video player do you like to use? Which music player do you like to use? Which photo gallery do you like to use? And so in iOS, we're so used to just transparently moving to the PDF and assuming that the user will be happy because that's the way everyone in iOS views PDF, and that's true. But if you jump to that assumption in Android and say, oh, everyone wants the native movie player to watch this movie, that's not always true. And everyone wants the native photo gallery or the native whatever. It's hard to get your head around if you're not using Android every day as a person, in that world. And so if you're an iOS developer or you're an iOS-centric person, you'll make assumptions that just aren't right. And your app will end up being iOS-y almost by accident. And then you don't realize why your audience doesn't embrace it. So it's very complicated. So it's the same content. It's the same content. But there's small little changes in the way that things work and the way that things, long tapping on a menu row. You don't do that as much in iOS. You swipe left to delete an item on a list, and the little delete button shows up. But in iOS, you hold. There's small little changes, and so all the way down to the way that it looks. The way that it looks when I launch an Android app, it's pretty common. And really the acid test, this is the way that we should do it as developers, is just look at the most successful apps. Look at the Evernotes, look at the Netflixes, look at Gmail and YouTube video player, and the most successful apps that are out there, Flipboard, they're not the same on iOS and Android. They understand and they spend a lot of money embracing highly talented people to help them come up with these decisions. And what you find is it's the same concept. Netflix plays movies. Gmail helps you check your email, but they do it a little bit differently, and both audiences are happy with the implementation. Same ideas, though. It shows email, same content, same movies, that kind of stuff. Good question, Warren.
Yeah, I never really thought of it that way. So, but it makes a lot of sense. Again, it's like you say, your perspective. I'm an iPhone user. I'm an iOS user.
Right.
I don't have an Android device, so I
Mm-hmm.
would think that I wouldn't
Right.
understand that concept.
Right. And it's easy as a developer to fall on a favorite. Call it falling on a favorite. And one thing that I really hope that somebody will come up with, and this is just one of my crazy ideas again, it's obviously not going to happen, but I want to pick up a different phone each day. I'm more than willing to pay the money to have a bunch of phones because I'm a developer and it's my living, and just like a mechanic might have a bunch of tools in his toolbox, I'd like to have 4 or 5 or 6 different phones. However, I can't have 4 or 5 or 6 different accounts with Verizon or AT&T or my carrier, not because it's not possible to pay for them, although I wouldn't want to. I want my same phone number to ring. I can't carry different phones around and have the same phone number. So why can't I take my little SIM card and slide it in the side of today's phone and be an Android guy today? It's frustrating, and I'm sure somebody in our audience will tell me, oh, you can do that, but I don't think I can. I think it's more complicated than that, because I think the SIM card isn't the same in the iPhone as it is in the Android, and it's just frustrating to me. Something as simple as like the memory stick, right? I mean, if it slides in, it slides in.
Right. But you're right. I think from a phone company's perspective, it's a lot more complicated than that. So.
Yeah, it must be. It must be, and obviously they must have, things to consider that I would never consider. And I'm gonna say, excuse me, by the way, we had a crazy loud truck out my office window right here.
Yeah.
This is my window, and right outside there is a bunch of construction going on. So far, if it's loud or whatever, we'll just have to deal with it.
Actually, I can't hear any of it going on. So
Okay, good.
I was going to
Good,
ask
good.
you the same thing about the guy mowing his lawn next door in the rain.
Ah,
You know,
I don't hear him.
It's been raining here nonstop for weeks on end. And
Yeah. Well, let's move to the next question then. In fact, why don't we, for sake of the recording, why don't we give ourselves a little pause
okay.
so we have a little break, and then we'll move into the next question. That ought to be good. That way we can separate it.
Sure. Okay, so David, I've got another question from the forum here. And this is from Resonant. And he asks the question, excuse me, missing release key. App is already in Play Store, but map tiles are not working. I got my Google Maps key for debug, but I didn't get my Google Maps key for release. So is there a way to get the key? If not, I've heard of http:/amap.to. Any more options? Thanks a lot. Now, Go Northwest.
So Resonant.
Yeah, let me go on down because
go ahead.
Our buddy did post a response, but I think you'll want to expound on it. It says, if you haven't already gotten your Google Maps API key for Android version 1 key, it's too late. They've shut down the ability to request those as they have moved on to version 2 now, which BuzzTouch doesn't quite yet support, but it's coming very soon. You can create an HTML screen and use the normal Google Maps method to display the map. So, any thoughts on that and what's coming? And
yeah, it's disappointing that he's ended up in this predicament, and Go Northwest is exactly right. We've got to get Resident's going to have to get a little bit creative based on what's happening. And so, just like the last question, let's back up a little bit and have a short discussion technically about what's happening, and we'll talk about some solutions to fix it. And so, when you compile your app using the Eclipse tool and you crunch all these source code files into one file and create this thing that you upload to the App Store or the Google Play Market, the Google Play Market, the Eclipse tool is doing something called signing it. And you're signing your application, in essence, with your identity as a developer, and you're submitting it to the App Store. So clearly you went through this process successfully. You signed your application, or I should say you, Resident, signed the application. I'll assume it's a him for now, but Resident, if you're a her, excuse me, I'll just assume you're a guy. So he signed the application and he uploaded it to the App Store, and so he didn't test it enough after he was done signing it, or maybe he did, and because his app looked like it was working, everything was fine, and then he realizes now that it's in the App Store, it's not in what we call debug mode anymore. It's in release mode. This is the device talking now, and you don't see your map tiles. Pretty common. So a few months ago, the solution would have been get the release key, insert it into your project into the right place, recompile, send it up to the Play Store. Everything would have been fine. However, it would have required a recompiling. You couldn't have done it just in the store in the live apps, and then the users would have needed to update their apps because that key becomes part of your application's binary or compressed and compiled file. It's not something you can change dynamically, say through the control panel or something like that. And so that would have been 3 months ago, and so, or in the past at some point. And so now that you can't do that, and the reason that you can't do that, like Go Northwest has said, is because Android pretty quickly, in my opinion, just decided that their version 1 Android maps aren't going to work anymore. And, well, they still work, but you can't get an API key anymore as a developer to use their Android maps. And so if you hadn't already done that, and you were in this couple of month development phase like thousands of people were, and you didn't realize this, you're a little bit stuck, and that's kind of where you are now. So residents a little bit stuck. And so the first solution, which is what I would recommend that Mark talked about, is more of a temporary solution, and it's certainly not a long-term or an ideal solution. And that is, you can, because the content is connected to a control panel, you can, and I'll make the assumption that it is, because your app is connected to a control panel, you can change the type of screen that you have from a map screen to a custom URL screen and just put in a Google map that'll take you to that location or show what you want. Now, certainly there's going to be some limitations on that. For example, you might have a hard time adding all the pin drops depending on how you're using the map, if it's used to show one location or a bunch of locations, and so I don't need to get into the big long discussion there, but you can throw a Google map in a web browser in your app pretty easily to kind of put a patch on what's going on and at least hide those ugly missing tiles. But I think we all understand the limitations of that idea. And so what you're going to want to do is, in essence, recreate your application's binary, recompress this using the newer version 2 Google Maps API key, which is something that we've been working on kind of desperately to support. And the reason, again, I'm not sure if whoever's listening to this video heard the previous question, but the previous question we talked a little bit about our bringing the Android project that we're delivering in downloads kind of more modernized and up to speed. The reason that we don't support version 2, the reason that the map plugin that I wrote years ago doesn't support version 2 maps is because it's designed to run in an activity, not in a fragment. And again, the discussion we had earlier was talking about the differences between an Android activity and an Android fragment. We're trying to move all the plugins toward fragments and away from activities. And in so doing, there's been this big log process. There's lots and lots of them, and we're slowly migrating them, and Maps is one of those. And so even if we were to change the plugin, which I've spent a lot of time on this one plugin, you wouldn't be able to just easily integrate it into your existing project or our existing download because it's a fragment, not an activity. And so it's super frustrating. And so we feel your pain there, resident, I think it was.
Yes.
The good news is, and I'll make some assumptions here, the fact that you've taken ownership of your app and you're super hands-on, you've compiled it and you've put it into the Play Store and it's yours, the good news is you can do all of this. You can do all of this, and it's not that big of a deal. There's lots and lots and lots of people out there, thousands really, who paid someone to make their app or got it from somebody else, and they don't have any access to the project, and they can't make these changes, and it's kind of difficult. And so for you, because you probably learned a little bit along the way and embraced, the BuzzTouch approach, and here you are learning something again, you can get through this, and your users will be a little bit disappointed for a while, and you'll be disappointed for a while, and that is kind of the nature of software. There are things that don't go quite as planned, and that's on your end, on our end, on everybody's end. And it sounds like this is one of those cases.
So just as a kind of a side question related to that, you only need one set of API keys, right, to use in any and all of your Android apps, right?
From Google?
Yes. So like if I create an Android app and I get my debug and release API keys, I can use them in my next Android app and my next Android app.
Ah, that's a great question. And the answer is no.
Oh, okay.
You used to be able to.
In the version 1?
You used to be able to in version 1. That's
okay.
Potentially one of their changes. And so what you have now, this is quite fascinating actually, how Google's transitioning into this new way of thinking. What you have now is you have an API, kind of a console page on Google.com, right? You go to whatever it is, apis.google.com, I can't remember what it is, but you go to the Google console page, and there's a long list of Google services that you might want to use. Push notifications through Google Cloud Messaging, Google Maps, Play Store integration with payments. Each one of these services has its own key. And each one of these keys requires the package name for your app. So in my test project that I showed earlier, my package name in this one I think is com.daviddebug. So if yours is com.Coles County Raceway, then that package name belongs to that app. And the next app you make is going to have a different package name and therefore is going to have a different key. So good question. So the good news is it's easier to make them now. It's much easier to make the keys. It used to be quite a bit more technical. The bad news is you're going to be needing to make them all the time, I think.
Okay.
So, Google's got their finger on it's just one more way. Just one more way. It's amazing how far and wide their reach is. It really is extraordinary. But frankly, if you wanted to make your own Maps software, or you wanted to make your own cloud messaging software, or you wanted to make your own payment software, it'd be quite a bit more difficult than agreeing to their terms and service, whether you agree or not. They give you a lot for your soul, some people say, but
Right.
it's
Well,
it's pretty amazing.
another kind of follow-on question to that. I saw an announcement last week where Google started shutting down some of these services. Some of them immediately, and some of them over time.
Yeah.
Does any of that shutdown have any effect on the basic Android package from BuzzTouch?
Not so far as we know, no. The only thing that's dependent on Google in the existing project that we're downloading right now, the only thing is Maps. And it actually causes a lot of problems too, and I'll explain why. When most new Android developers create an Android app, they open up Eclipse and they say new Android app, and one of the first things that you do is you choose what platform of version or what version of Android you want to support.
Yes.
And you get a big long list of API libraries, basically. So this is the Froyo, Gingerbread, Eclair, 1.5, 2.3, all these different versions. Now it's up to 4.2 or something like that. So you make that choice the first thing that you do. And so in this long list of choices that you have as a new developer looking through the libraries that you've downloaded as part of the SDK, you have an Android version and a Google version of the same libraries. You have Android 4.0 and Google 4.0. You have Android 2.5 and Google 2. It's crazy. Sure. And so the only reason we've been telling people for a couple of years now, choose Google APIs, not the Android APIs, is because it depends on the maps. And if you put a map plugin in your app, we know in advance that you'll need Google APIs to do this.
Okay.
So, again, we're trying to change that, and we're trying to make it much easier to understand and move everyone towards Android 4.0. Done, right? There's a whole other discussion to be had. In fact, this might be a good conversation to schedule again about versioning for Android and what platform should I target? Should I worry about old devices? Should I worry about new devices only, and that kind of thing? And I could talk about that, but the bottom line is we at BuzzTouch are always going to be trying to move you, the person making the app, towards the latest thing. That's our responsibility to help you transition from what you have, or if you're just starting what you're making, into the future with the newest and greatest thing. And part of what we're trying to accomplish is when your application is no longer working because Android changes significantly, we love the idea of you being able to easily go to your control panel, re-download your package, recompile it, and resubmit it, because somebody like us and some people like our community has freshened up or modernized the code base to support the new things so that you don't have to. That's a significant part of what we do that kind of goes overlooked sometimes. And I know that it takes time for us to battle through these changes like we're doing right now, where 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks worth of work to bring Android up. We still think it's much easier for you that we are doing that and you don't have to. So
that's it is.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. And maybe one day maybe at in our future, you know, maybe we can do a better job of explaining that fact. And we're doing the exact same thing for iOS 7 right now. I know for a fact that there's some things in iOS 7 that are a little bit janky, that need to be changed just to transition through that. And a lot of developers aren't going to know how to do it, and they're not going to want to do it. And again, the control panel, the magic of what we do should make a lot of that easier. And we're getting better and better with each release too. I think BuzzTouch started with iOS, I don't even think 3.0 was out. 2.0, I can't remember. From the very beginning, it was crazy. I don't remember the numbers. It's been so long. And with each release of iOS, we've had to do quite a bit of changes and understand what works and doesn't work. And we're trying to do that for people who are making apps and who are interested in making apps and people who own apps, so that they don't have to. That's the whole idea.
All right.
Cool. So we got a couple of breaks in there now.
Okay.
I think you got one more. You had to leave at 9:30?
I do have to leave at 9:30, so you got 22 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So you got another one in there too. I think this is a good discussion. This is cool.
I like the way this is working out, personally. So, all right. Okay, David. There is an entire forum category related to Scringo integration. Okay?
Yep.
So, my newbie question is going to be, what is Scringo? And then there's a series of questions after that. So,
perfect. Perfect. And this is a great conversation to have, and hopefully Scringo will hear this, the Scringo guys.
okay.
So Scringo, I'm sure there's a marketing tagline that I don't know. There's probably something like, you know, Scringo allows you to make a community within your app, or social networking, or monetize your app, or something like that. So advertising speak wise, I don't know how they describe themselves. We talk to a technical audience. We talk to people making apps. So I'll describe it that way. Scringo is a sidebar hidden behind your app that you can expose as a user with, say, a swipe or tapping a button. So again, think of modern paradigm design concepts when you're using the Facebook app. The tools slide out from the side. And so instead of a tab bar along the bottom, older design, they've gotten more real estate by getting rid of the tab bar on the little screen and sliding in the common navigation elements from behind. So we're all, again, getting used to this. All the new Google apps are this way. It's just kind of a new way of thinking. So technically speaking, that's what Scringo allows you to do. So that's kind of the easy part to understand. It's just a sidebar. The cool part about Scringo is what does it do? What does this sidebar do? So it allows you to do all kinds of things. So as a user, it allows you to do things. And as an app developer, it allows you to do things. And there's a difference. So let's talk about the user first. So as the user person using the app, it might allow me to easily get a hold of the developer. It might allow me to easily get a hold of someone else using the app. Maybe I want to be in a little bit of a chat conversation, or maybe I want to discover who's using the app around me. Things like this are kind of cool as a user. So the user can have these features in the app that are, you know, whether they're common or not, I don't know, but they're quite sophisticated to create. And the app developer didn't really have to do much, right? They just used Scringo. And so that's what it is to the user. So for the app developer, what it is you can probably imagine, based on what I just explained, that it allows them to add these cool features to their app without writing code, in essence, or at least much code. And so it's a service. It's a little bit like BuzzTouch in that regard. It's a web-based online service. Cool guys, startup. You know, they're doing great things over there. And we believe that adding these kinds of functionalities to your app could make a bunch of sense. And so we partnered up with Scringo early on, kind of our first strong partnership, and we worked closely with those guys to try to figure out a way to make it, what would be the best way to include it in my BuzzTouch app. And since then, you can see we've worked with quite a few other partners with the same idea, is there's always going to be people out there who have people, as in developers and firms, who have amazing products and amazing ideas that are better than BuzzTouch in many ways when it comes to making an app or making an app better. Scringo's a good example. Just think of advertising SDKs. These are called SDKs. So an advertising SDK, if I added it to my app to include ads in my app, you can all understand why it's much easier to add the SDK as a developer to include ads in my app than it is to try to figure out on our own all of the logic behind not just where the ads display, not just when they display, but who's selling the ads, who's going out and finding advertisers for my app. And so an advertising SDK makes perfect sense. So there's lots of examples of those cool SDKs that do neat things. You're going to see a neat one coming in our control panel that you're going to be able to use in your BuzzTouch app pretty easily called Isotope. And Isotope is really cool in that it's an SDK that allows you to work with audio in a professional way much easier than being an audio expert. And I'll give you a silly, fun example. I think most people know who T-Pain is. He's like this weird entertainer with this strange voice.
The auto-tune guy.
There's an app out there that allows you to sing to it or talk to it, and it transforms your voice into T-Pain style. And it's super funny, and it's super popular with the kids, and they use this app all the time. Well, it's the Isotope SDK that allowed the developer to do that without a bunch of work. So it's just another example of an interesting, cool SDK. And so you'll see them slowly being added to our control panel because we believe that, you know, as much as we could make our own sidebar, as much as we could investigate how to manipulate audio tracks and Objective-C and low-level things, and from our end, we believe it's better for our end users and our customers and our app creators and app owners and people using in BuzzTouch in the community to embrace the SDK concept, because generally speaking, those people are much faster at these ideas. They're more passionate about that one concept. They execute it in a better, stronger way. And so rather than us developing all these features that we see coming out in SDKs and just adding them into the control panel, it just doesn't seem like the right approach for us and the app owners and the users. And so we're embracing the SDK relationship building. Our ultimate goal along that line, and I know this isn't related to the first question, but it's still kind of related to Scringo. Our ultimate goal is our business revolves around members and guests. And BuzzTouch members are, in essence, paying customers. And BuzzTouch guests are free visitors. And we embrace both, of course. But ultimately, what we would like to see happen is all of the SDK partners that we show and we have on our screens, we would like them to offer something special and valuable and unique and interesting to members, BuzzTouch members that use their SDK, as compared to BuzzTouch guests who use their SDK. It's going to take some time to work those things out. I know some of them have already talked about that, and if you look in the forum, I think Scringo's already doing that. But the point is, that's why we embrace these SDKs, is we think they're better, and we think we can bring something to our membership audience that they deserve. We think that a BuzzTouch member, not just because they've paid the fee, but because they've demonstrated some commitment to this ecosystem that is mobile app developing.
Right.
We believe that the SDK companies should treat them a little bit differently, and because that concept is new, SDKs in the BuzzTouch control panel, because that concept is new, it's logical and natural that it would take a little bit of time to work in that regard. And so Tony Christo on our end, who's our partner relations kind of guy, and he's really good at that kind of stuff, you know, he understands this, and he's slowly working to try to build that list of partners who understand us and embrace us and our users, but certainly our members. And he's slowly opening the dialogue about, okay, Scringo, what is it that our members are going to get when they use Scringo versus a guest? And so that's kind of the future of that part of our operation, all rooted in the fact that we think it's better for app owners to do it that way than us doing it for them or them doing it themselves.
Okay. Well, along that line, what we do for the app developer versus what they do for themselves, there's a long list of forum posts and questions about how Scringo was in our app package and now is
Uh
not
huh.
in our
Yep.
app package. And so what is all that conversation all about?
Okay. Yeah. Great question. So in the early days of this relationship with Scringo, the ultimate idea or goal and the very ambitious plan was you were going to download your iOS project and it was going to automatically have the Scringo SDK included in it. That was the original plan, and we actually did that. We actually did quite a bit of testing with doing just that. And what we found was, and this was strictly our opinion, BuzzTouch's opinion, what we found was that wasn't the best way to do it. And there's a few reasons why. The first reason why is not everybody wants Scringo in their app. Plain and simple. And yet they had it. They had all this code and then all this stuff. And it just didn't make any sense. And so it raised a bunch of questions. What is this Scringo stuff? And why is it in my app? I don't even know what Scringo is. Are you guys, paying Scringo? Is Scringo paying you? What is this stuff?
Right.
So that was the number one reason, is it was causing confusion. And it was also causing confusion amongst people who did want to use it. But mostly the confusion came from people who didn't know what Scringo was. The second reason was, and this matches up with the conversation we just had, our goal is to expose you to a lot of SDKs. Our goal is to expose the developing community, our audience, to lots of different neat SDKs that we think are cool. If we included all of them in the download, and there were 12 of them that you wanted to use, an SDK for advertising, an SDK for sound effects, an SDK for video chatting, an SDK for Scringo sidebar, and on and on and on, your download from the BuzzTouch control panel would be extraordinarily large. So it isn't that we can't handle large downloads, and it isn't that we don't think our users can handle large downloads, but it doesn't make any sense to assemble a download that way when you already know that the user who's building the app is going to have to go to Scringo anyway. They're going to have to go to, almost all of these sites require some kind of a key, some kind of a registration, some kind of a relationship between the developer and the service, the SDK. So if they're going to be on their site anyway, why not just click the link there and download the SDK? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And so there's, we learned this along the way. And so what we landed on was, the reason that they don't just go click the link and download it over there, there's two reasons. One is they don't know about it. They don't know that iZotope exists. So they would never go to iZotope.com and download the project, the SDK, because they don't exist. So a large part of what we do is discovery. Let's help the app owners discover these cool SDKs. So that was one thing. And so the screen now, when you download your app, shows these SDKs that you can discover. And two is, and this is the kind of the most important reason in my mind, is even if you knew about the iZotope download, it doesn't necessarily know you're going to know how to use it. What the heck is this thing, and how do I use it?
Right.
And so for our audience, they want to put an SDK in their app. They don't necessarily even know how. So what we've decided to do is two things. One is show you the SDKs on the download screen so you can learn a little bit about who they are. That's the exposure part, the discovery part. And two is include a useful, detailed, thoughtful set of instructions in your download on how the heck I use this thing.
Right.
So that's our bargain for the SDK publisher, is you guys make us an SDK. I mean, you make us a PDF. Your SDK already exists. You make us a nice, thoughtful, well-written PDF set of instructions that tells me, the app owner, how to use your SDK in my BuzzTouch app, and we're happy to show it on our download screen. And so that's the reason that the 10-minute answer why Scringo is not automatically baked into the project when you download it, because we believe it's better to keep the download smaller, show you other SDK partners, and give you detailed instructions versus just having it in there and you don't know how to work the thing. So we have a lot of work to go there. You know, these detailed instructions, some of the SDKs are prettier and better looking and more thoughtful than others. And again, Tony's working on making some improvements to these instructions because, again, we're all learning together, right? We're trying to figure out what our audience likes. And anyway, that's the answer there. Great one.
Yeah, that's, as you know, David, I went through that pain a year ago trying to make Parse and then
Yes.
Urban Airships work in my app, and I never did get Parse to work.
Right.
And
Right.
I never actually got Urban Airships to work. Turns out it was a whole different set of problems.
Yeah.
That was a painful process to
Exactly.
go out there, download their stuff, try to interpret their generic instructions to fit in the BuzzTouch environment. And some people.
Right, so long term.
Yeah,
totally. Long term, what we're trying to do is we want to have the detailed instructions, and we want to have a separate forum for each SDK. You brought it up yourself. Right now, we have a Scringo forum, but we don't have the other forums for the other SDKs that we're showing. We're not quite sure how we're going to do that technically, because it's kind of rapid right now.
Right.
And we don't want to just make a long list of forums. That doesn't really make much sense. And then the other thing too, and this is something that I hope our SDK partners recognize and understand that we're sincere when we say this. We're not trying to hijack their app owning traffic. We don't want. I mean, it's one thing to say that they discovered the SDK through BuzzTouch, and that would be nice. And it's nice that we could show the SDK partner who we care greatly about, you know, look, here's some new developers that don't know your SDK, and now they do, and I think that's cool. But that's a presumptuous thing to say, right? A lot of people might already know these SDKs, and we didn't necessarily, you know, turn them on to the thing. And so if we make a forum for each SDK, and there's all these conversations going around this SDK in our forums, that might not be best for the SDK publisher. They might not want that conversation going on our site around their SDK, and they might want that conversation going on their site. And so I'm just very sensitive to that, and we are trying to figure out a way. We think that they're going to be happy to have a forum on BuzzTouch.com that's dedicated to their product, because in essence it's eyes and traffic and marketing, and we think it's going to be harmful or harmless and not harmful.
Right.
But we're not jumping in with that until we're sure, you know, how we're gonna roll that out. We did with Scringo because we know Scringo's happy about it.
Right. Well, kind of along those lines, and this is a different SDK that we're working with. Tabatu.
Yes.
Tabatu is kind of, I don't know a lot about that, and we won't get into that. But I will say that whoever Danny is from Tabatu is now on our forum and has introduced herself, letting us know that she is available to support us. So I think that's a great linkage there between
absolutely
what they do. So I was
I agree
to see that.
One thing that I would recommend that you do, Warren, and this is just an idea, and I think that it would help our audience a great deal. When you hear from a Danny in the forum, or you hear from you know, any of these people from these other SDKs, having an interview with them like this might be a fantastic opportunity for us to learn a little bit about them and embrace them in our community. And maybe we can do a half-an-hour webinar, maybe the three of us. Maybe we can do a meeting where you and I and Danny and Warren, you know, Warren, David, and Danny, the three of us hang out or something. That could be kind of cool.
Right. I think it'd be great because it's great for them to get to know our audience and to expose their product. You know, other than a name, I don't know a lot about these SDKs.
Yeah.
But maybe if I saw it and saw someone that's knowledgeable about it explain it, I'd think, well, that solves a problem that I've been trying to fight my way through, or this is something my customers would greatly appreciate. So.
And we should actually work with Tony on that. I misspoke there. It would probably be best if it was you and Tony and Danny and maybe me too, but just have a conversation around it with us. That would be great.
Absolutely. I'll see what I can do. So, all right. Well, I've got to run. I got to go to work.
Yeah. Perfect.
But
So you go to work. We'll cut this into 3 things, and we'll go
Yeah.
from there.
yeah, I probably won't get it posted until overnight tonight.
And don't post it until I compress this one, because maybe if we both do, we'll see what Camtasia does.
Okay.
Did you write the times down when the breaks were?
No, I didn't. I'll just watch
Okay.
it through it because I'm gonna
Me too.
upload it
Okay.
to my iMovie and then chop it up a little bit.
Thanks for waking me up.
Got to start your day sometime, man.
It's awesome, dude. Bye.